Welcome to Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty Gensius, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host for Circular Firing Squad. We have 5 members, 5 questions, and 5 answers for each question. Each squad member generates a question that we all have to answer, ranging from the academic to the abyssal. And I had to look that word up, abyssal. But yeah, if you don't know what it means, look it up because I can't remember the exact definition at this point. Hey, it's our 75th episode. We're 75 and still alive. So we've got some great guests on tonight. Some of our regulars had childhood birthday parties, baseball games. It's just kind of a strange time of the year. So I'm glad that we have guests in, and we're going to try and pull some more visitors in so we have a good panel. But let's go ahead and see who we've got with us in this episode.
Hi, everybody. Elliot Ingersoll, Cleveland State University and host of Apply Topically.
Oh, it's me. I forgot. Yes. I'm Edil Torres Rivera, and I'm a faculty member at Wichita State University and immediate past president of the American Cancer Association.
What's up, everybody? My name is Mitch Conrad. I am a third-year clinical mental health counseling graduate student at Cleveland State University and currently interning at Baldwin-Wallace University.
Cool.
Hello, everyone. This is Mariaimeé Gonzalez, go by Maria, and I'm currently the Executive Director, Clinical Operations and Community Outreach at a university in the Pacific Northwest, past WASES President, and current President of the ACA of Washington State. So glad to be here.
So we're going to be kind on the new folks who have joined us, but feel free to jump in as you see fit. This show might be a little more rougher, but it's our 75th show, so what the heck. Elliot, you have the first question.
All right. And this grew out of this reading I'm doing on quantum computing and a lot of predictions that the Silicon Age will start to look like its version of a Rust Belt. So I started thinking, if there's another huge shift in technology, what counseling interventions could we craft to help people go from a digital age to an analog age for those who want to go backwards?
Actually, Elliot, what you said was if there was an electromagnetic pulse and all electronics shut down in the world, how would we prepare clients for that? Is that a good depiction of it?
Yeah, that's fair. I was just trying to lighten it up a bit, but yep, that was it.
Edil, you've got the first response.
Yeah, let me take a shot at that. I think that the one of the most important pieces that we have is the human interaction. And well, the computer age, the Zooms, the Microsoft things, give to us more access to the client. We still need to teach people into personal skills, people skills, and I think that that's what actually make us a little bit more human, if you wish. So I don't think that we need to put that down. I know that we have classes now on developing skills, which is kind of interesting because when I first started in the field, there was no such a class. You even come with the personal skills yourself, or you don't do it at all, So I think we need to continue to kind of use that piece, and in that way be prepared in case the software and the sophistication kind of go out the window.
Yeah, so in a way, I'm taking kind of my approach on this question was right. Like I feel like we have a lot of these interventions right already, and we've sort of moved away. It seems like sometimes we've moved away from types of interventions that are more like, less sort of like digitizing, like back to like more analog stuff, right? Like, and so for example, like some of the stuff that I was thinking about was like, in so, for Edil and Maria, one of the things that I'm, interested in is psychedelic assisted therapy. And in psychedelic assisted therapy, there's a lot of like rhythmed movement, for instance, that people, right, like can practice, or something like a drum circle, right? Something like journaling, like getting back to, right, like the basics of stuff, instead of trying to like move forward where it feels like these devices and you know, these sort of like almost like products for mental health. Uh, it seems to be getting us for maybe further away from mental health. So I'd like to see us return back to, right, like some of the more, right, like mindfulness based stuff, sort of more of the meditation stuff, more of the, being out in nature, right? Like I think there's a lot of options that are currently available that we've in a way sort of like forgotten about, that could be options, because a lot of counseling right now is really like, hey, we're just going to like stick in this office, and like that can, that's beneficial. And also, right, like what is the option for, what are alternative options that existed more in the past, that communities used to use before there really was the profession of counseling, right? Like there was healing stuff there too.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think of, I have this conversation with all people, my brother who's a techie. So we talk about this because even as somebody in the profession there, he's seen such a change over the decades. And we were talking about this disconnect that we're seeing. And I think about specifically more of when clients come in, I would say maybe from not just the younger generations, but people who are really struggling to try to put boundaries around technology use. How do we help provide some clear strategic opportunities with them when working with them? And I know like in people's homes, and sometimes we're working with clients, we talk about implementing like a technology-free zone, right? What does that mean? And why would we want to do that? But it's really looking at times where we do put down our phones, we do step away from the computer, and being really intentional and mindful around that. Whether it's around times when you have meals, how often do we go to restaurants and we see people at the table still with the phone in their hand while they're eating with others? Another thing I think of is digital fasting. you know, pulling back. So, I mean, for some people, it's really hard for them to pull away from technology. It actually creates a lot of anxiety and restlessness. And so how do we do that with people in a way that's intentional and maybe gradual, so they could get some sleep or study for a test or get prepared for something that's important in their life, or just learn how to set those boundaries, be more thoughtful around it. I think like what I'm hearing from each of you is this intentionality to really be in touch with what's happening around us. Like Mitch, you were saying mindfulness, going outside, being outdoors, just reconnecting with um, the world around us that isn't going so fast as technology does, and being really thoughtful about that. And I think for younger folks, it might be even setting up a reward system, something like that, a reward system, setting up, if you use this less, we'll go outside. This is, giving them an opportunity to understand the benefits of putting down and getting away from technology, and replacing that with a new love, new passion, new hobby. Who knows where that will take them in their life and their balance of life. And I think those conversations are going to have to happen more and more as we work with different generations.
All of your answers have kind of, I'd like to say, let's go full drum circle, because Adele talked about connectedness. And when I thought about this, I thought we need to do group work. What is the kind of things that we do in the classroom when we tell them, everybody put your phones down? Because if we had a large catastrophe where all of that was wiped out, we would be doing class without technology and without phones. So it means interactive stuff, and challenging that. And Maria, as you were speaking, the thing that came to mind, there's a Talking Heads song called Nothing But Flowers. And it's basically the story of post-apocalyptic world. There was a factory. Now there's mountains and rivers. We caught a rattlesnake. Now we have something for dinner. And it was the whole idea that we kind of have to, if this happened, we kind of have to go back to significant human relations and human interaction. So that's my answer to that question. Elliot?
These are wonderful answers. Thank you, everybody. I was thinking kind of more utilitarian, like I would start an intervention for somebody. I would lure them in with a VHS tape of an old Fender tube amp warming up. And then I would come on like, hi, I'm your guide back to the 20th century. And that amount of time that took for this amp to warm up, now you double that. That's the amount of time it's going to take you to get a TV station tuned in on your television set. Now double that. That's the amount of time it's going to take to get through to someone on the phone. And then double that. That's the amount of time it's going to take to get hot water out your pipes. So I think that'd get them started anyway. It's like a starter kit.
All right.
All right, cool. By the way, I also remember the days when one intervention is to be able to touch someone. Now we cannot do that anymore. I remember there was, doing some kind of counseling session and put your hands on somebody's shoulders and that person immediately started catharsis because you were able to touch it. But that's not here nor there. I need to do my question. Okay, my question is how has your program or how do you see yourself including this colonization in your current curriculum or practice?
Yeah, love this question. Have been thinking about it a lot lately because of my interest in psychedelic assisted therapy stuff, right? And so, maybe for listeners who aren't familiar of how these practices were really driven underground, psychedelics specifically in South America and parts of Mexico by the Spanish, and like when those practices were driven underground, there was a lot of knowledge lost about rituals and about what was effective and what worked. And a lot of that is lost to time because of, that process of, the Spaniards coming in and just like burning books. It was heresy, right? And now I think in the psychedelic space, and especially in the space where people are doing integration work after using psychedelic assisted therapy, a lot of these healing practices, and also within the process of providing it, but this in reference to counseling, I think that it does go back to some of those like analog solutions about like what is integration like, what are the healing processes like that have been effective for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and all of a sudden, right, like there's a group of people who come along and it's like, actually, like, no, we like, know how to do it better. And now we've got, right, this like medical module where medical model, goodness, where, right, like people are receiving, ketamine assisted psychotherapy as a psychedelic without like even someone like in the room for 2 to 3 hours. It's just become like, this is just a medicine and it's not anything outside of that. And to me, it's one of the, largest concerns that I have with the industry right now. Not that the medicines and integration aren't effective. I think clearly the clinical research bears that out. The challenge is that when people are being provided these medicines in hospital cots and are sort of like asked to like, hey, just like come in, like we don't need anybody there for you. You don't have to do any type of like integration afterwards. It's like it completely misses the point of hundreds, if not thousands of years of practice. So just my 2 cents on that one, but a great question. Love it.
I next. I'm not sure. Okay, diving in. So I love this question. And I think this is throughout my career, this has been a lifestyle, not just something we do in the classroom or in the sessions, right? This is something we have to live, something that I think we need to learn to be congruent with in and outside of academia. But I think what was fortunate for me a couple of years ago, I worked in a department where we did co-created actually a decolonized checklist, a strategic plan, as well as a department that went 3 years out. And this included looking at really being intentional about reclaiming Indigenous and marginalized voices into all our courses and spaces. And I've had the opportunity to work with many Indigenous tribes throughout my career, and right now in the Pacific Northwest, I'm really close to one particular tribe, and really have been really thoughtful about how we train students and supervisors to work with the tribe, looking at cultural responsive practices, looking at centering their voices in the work that we do. That's been really important, and looking at cultural humility as we're doing the training ourselves and as we learn. I have a different Indigenous background than the tribes I work with, so I also want to be very thoughtful of my own space and how I'm intentional when I'm in spaces of other communities. And I think as a profession, I think this is a place we have growth, is being more intentional about being collectivists in the work that we do. 80% of the world is collectivist, but a lot of the work that we do with clients tend to center around a European style, individualistic style of work. How do we pull away from that and go back into our Indigenous souls and roots and bring collectivist practices into our spaces? And being really thoughtful about also the institutional harm and restorative justice that has to happen in this work that we do. Because if we're going to talk about bringing in decolonized practices, we have to talk about the colonized experiences that happened in order for that, for why we're here to decolonize. And I think those conversations about the colonization has to occur in more spaces that has happened. And also we have to decolonize the practices and policies that are in place. What I always find interesting is the systems that we work with, they're very colonized, and yet we're constantly trying to work through a decolonized lens in a colonized system. And that to me can be some of the most challenging work that we do, is how do we navigate those? It reminds me of a river. You could feel the stress, when you get in the water, you could feel the stream pulling you, and yet you're trying to go a different direction. So how do we navigate those systems and do this work that's sustainable long-term? Because what I have seen is that people with good intentions dive in, but I've seen it's very performative. It lasts a short amount of time. And sometimes they're actually implementing harm in the work that they're doing because they didn't go through the right training or awareness or look at the restorative justice part in this work. And I think that if that's the case, then that can create long-term harm. Clients and communities can see when someone's coming in and just being performative and then bouncing. That's not helpful in any kind of way. So how do we create long-term sustainable practices and policies that really hold us accountable to the work that we do and unpack the truth and the histories and the current systems that are happening that hurt our communities? And then at the same time, look at collective healing. So if we're going to look at colonial trauma, how do we look at collective healing to work together in a profession that many communities have a distrust with because of the trauma that has happened? But I am glad that this is a direction that many professions are wanting to lean in and go towards. I appreciate that this is the direction that we are going as the American Counseling Association. And I think that there is a lot there to be unpacked, but I do think we have a lot of good people with great intentions and with experience and lived experience that could really help us shape and evolve as a profession and go this direction.
How the hell do I follow that? I'll tell you, this was an area introduced to me by Edil, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And when I thought of this question, I thought of the fact that in our program, we have an advanced multicultural counseling course. It's required for our doctoral students. It's an elective for our master's students. have quite a few master's students who sign up for it because they're interested in that diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of work that we're talking about now, that they get that in the master's only course as part of their required course. But it was, I started introducing this concept of colonization and decolonization in the advanced course as I learned it from Dr. Torres Rivera. And occasionally he's even come in and I think spoken to our class about it. It's a summer course that we teach every other summer in terms of enrollment. So, when I looked at that question, it's sort of like, this is the start. After listening to Maria speak, there are so many other places that we could go with this in our program that we don't. But we've got to start on it. And for those listening who don't even have that piece in their program yet, you got to start.
So when you all are talking about decolonization, I assume you're talking about interactions with the people already living here, like living here now. I took it more literally like North American continent.
This colonization happened in every country. So, I mean, the colonization process is in every country. We, as Latinos, were colonized by the Spaniards, but yes, we Latinos colonized our native people, so and then Africa have been colonized by everybody. So I think that every country have been affected, in particular, people of color are the one who been more affected. When I give my answer, I talk about that piece as well, too.
Thank you, though. That helps because I think we do a lot. And my first reaction was the same as Mitch's. I was thinking of a lot of the indigenous healing ceremonies, the use of sacred plants. And I think this may not be the way people would advise doing it, but I think it's also a good way to bring a lot of these ideas in the back door. If you shift consciousness, it's open to a lot more opportunities, I think. But yeah, there was something else I was going to say about that. I'm blanking, but that was the main thing when I thought about the continent. But yeah, we've all kind of, that was the other thing. We have a colleague who's kind of an expert on the Philippines, which is a really interesting area. But we had a whole dialogue about the process of colonization from the Spanish to the Americans, then the Japanese, then back to the Americans, and all the things that went into self-rule. And that was stuff I knew there were over 7,000 islands, but that's all I really knew about the Philippines. So I think we have a lot of good dialogues, and we have the counseling LGBTQ plus course has been very popular since its inception about 5 years back. But so now I'm thinking about decolonization in very broad terms. So I apologize if that wasn't the scope you were aiming for.
When we talk about decolonization actually again is racism. Okay, all the countries from the north took over countries from the south, and when you look at an example like Africa has been colonized by every European. Okay, so one of the things that's very interesting is when I teach multicultural, I try to use the knowledge for the global south. Like we talking about this colonization, we talk about liberation psychology like it's something new, and it's not. Martin Luther King was not talking about social justice, which I find that so interesting, because it was implied. That's where it was. Okay, so we talk about the whole course of multicultural. The multicultural piece had to have a preamble of colonization and discolonization. And now the new term is discoloniality. Okay, and what you do in discoloniality is the colonization is a one-shot thing, and when you look at the history, and then discoloniality is an ongoing process and trying to move out from the whole Western mentality, of healing people. Some people go far to talk about indigenize the whole idea of counseling and psychotherapy. Okay. But again, I'm trying to be, the more that I talk about this conversation, the more that I'm trying to make it as native as possible to the people who I'm working with. And that's, you introduce that in the multicultural course. But guess what? In the multicultural course, anything that people don't want to talk about, from LGBTQ issues to political issues, they put it in the multicultural course, which for me is stupid. But that kind of more of what I'm talking about, this conversation from that process. Did that make sense, Elliot?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
I appreciate your argument.
All right, cool. So I think it's Maria now.
Yeah, and I just want to add something to that because I think also what I'm hearing you say, Del, is I think what happens is that they try to put everything into one course. If you're truly doing decolonization work or liberation work, it should be throughout the whole entire program. It's a culture. It's not just something you do on Wednesdays from 3 to 6 p.m. It's something that needs to be ingrained from the whole entire when people are understanding even the nature of the department or program they're going into, department culture, training of faculty and staff, to each class has an opportunity to have rich conversations about how that content was even created or what was decided to be taught in that class. And I think that there is an opportunity in every course in the curriculum for decolonization work to occur and liberation work to occur. We have to reframe. I think as a profession, I think we only put it in 1 or 2 classes. It needs to be embedded throughout the whole experience. Otherwise, people are going to think this is a part-time experience. Like, oh, I decolonize just, certain times of the days or weeks. No, this is a part of a professional identity. If it is part of your professional identity, then you navigate within those systems with that mindset at all times. Some of us have to do that through our lives because of our cultural positionality. We don't get a timeout. So how do we teach the profession? How do we teach the next generations to come in and conceptualize this, that this is something that you are learning as part of your identity? And to be really thoughtful about how they are navigating with awareness around their own cultural positionality within the systems in which they're intersecting with. And I think that's something we role model for them from the very beginning so they can learn how to do that. Some people don't know how to do that. And so how do we have those conversations to get people to be more comfortable leaning into those experiences and opportunities where they feel like, okay, this is something I can do in, throughout, no matter what, whether I'm working with individuals, groups, whether I'm in a classroom, whether I'm at a community, whether I'm out in the streets doing advocacy work, right? How do we keep that passion going?
This could be a podcast of its own, this issue, because I have a lot of ideas and questions. I hear what you're saying, and I'm also like, I don't know, how much of it do we do? And I think that's up for debate. And professional identity's never been one of my things. I've always like start with being a healer, and then no one ever asked, are you a psychologist? Are you a counselor? What, but I think we got to be careful what we put into the professional identity. And I have a lot of questions about ACA's position on that too. So maybe we could just, this could be a question for a whole podcast at some point. I would enjoy that.
I agree. Go ahead,
Okay,
Mike.
Mitch, you're up.
All right. This is intended to be a very lighthearted and reminiscing kind of question, I hope. What was the favorite toy that you played with during your childhood?
Maria, you first.
Sorry, I'm messing up on that sequence. There were a few, but I would say the one that stands out the most was my bike. I loved my bike. I rode that bike everywhere. I would go riding for hours and hours, and I would come back late at night. I'd leave in the morning and come back, and I would just ride throughout the block. And there was a creek not far from us, and go into the woods. And this was in the early 80s, all right? So I know now it's a little bit different now around safety and everything, but back then you could just go and explore, and I had definitely adventurous heart and spirit. So I loved that bike. I crashed into several things with that bike too, but I would just keep going. I didn't care. I was all tore up, but I would get back on it. I love that thing.
I think I have the answer to that question. And if I don't edit myself, the real answer to that question is my blanket as a child. And it was named Goigi. I don't know why. But I was third in line. I was the last child. And I had 3-year age differences and 4-year age differences between my older siblings. So I had one 7 years older than me and one 3 years older than me. So I wound up spending a lot of time alone because of the age difference. They were out doing their stuff. So I didn't have playmates to play with. So that became sort of my companion um, for my childhood, my early childhood. Real answer, more professional answer, less shame-induced answer. Lionel Trains, the S gauge, and in our basement, and they're still in our basement. We haven't quite figured out how to get them out of my mother's house, which we're trying to take apart and do things. My older brother, 7 years older, had a HO scale, very small scale trains, and a very complicated layout and design. And I think he probably had the S gauge and gave that up, and then I inherited that. So, these engines that you could run around on the track and you put little pellets in its smokestack and it would smoke out because it would heat up enough to smoke them. That was my favorite toy.
Yeah, I would have to say my stuffed animals and dolls. Those were, yeah, I still have a dream bear. I don't go to sleep without a bear. I'm no fool. I mean, yeah, we would create whole stories and go explore places. It's like kind of like Puff the Magic Dragon, except I never grew out of it. But, no one's perfect.
I have a few. The first one was something they're calling in Puerto Rico gallos. We used to be like what you call sea that we used to play as kid. Hitting each other with that thing. Until one break. Okay, gallos mean like roosters. Okay, so there was like a fire rooster, but there was two seas until I was 12 years old. When I was 12 years old, my mother bought me boxing glove. And I stayed with my boxing glove until I went to the army. I was my last fight was 24 years old. That was my first job in the army. So the boxing glove really cut me in my heart. And I used to carry the boxing glove everywhere and sparring with everybody in the street. I thought it was kind of cool. So
That's very
interesting.
Puerto Rican. That's very Puerto Rican. I love that.
Yeah, everybody, thanks for your answers there. It certainly, I had a prepared answer and then somebody of course had to say stuffed animal, and I'm like, oh man, my teddy bear, of course, Teddy, right? Like that was something that I've had since like I've been a baby and still have it. Don't sleep with it, but maybe I should apparently. Um, one of the things that I thought about too was, because I didn't want to take sort of like my easy way out, which was like, oh, I would just say like video games because I played a lot of video games when I was a kid. But I really loved Connects because I appreciated how they kind of like snapped together in the same kind of way that like Legos kind of like snap together. And there's almost like sound play going on with some of the like those kinds of toys. And Connects was also like really cool. You got those books that you could like build something, directly from, someone's sort of like suggestion, like, hey, you can like build this. And then it was like, okay, well, now that I've sort of like built all the things in this book, what else can I build? And so it was a great way to sort of imagine, what are some additional things that can go on with, toys like that. I really do miss, I got a chance to go to be with my nieces and nephews recently. I really did miss like the Legos. We played Legos. We played like the trains, and I'm like, what? Maybe we're doing the wrong stuff in therapy. I don't know, right? Like I'm just like, this was really therapeutic. Maybe I should do this instead of go to counseling. I don't know, but yeah, really appreciate everybody sharing their answers.
I do have to say, I have some really cool toys from Father Christmas, and one was called a toss across, and it was like tic-tac-toe with bean bags. There was Rock'em Sock'em robots. I've been saving these things. I'm taking them with me to the nursing home. I'll be the cool analog guy. I'll be like, don't worry, there's games we can play. Watch.
I like that.
Cool. Mhm.
Okay, I think I'm next with the next question. And it is, what is the most random fact that you know?
Uh, this was tough for me to answer, but it's stuff that sticks in my head. When I was in high school, I wound up getting in a program where each high school in the city of Chicago provided two juniors to work for the city of Chicago in a summer job, and we were placed in different departments. And I was placed in the Department of Human Resources, which did a lot of cultural events around town, did like food and milk provisions in different community areas. And one of the jobs that I got during the summer, they had a map book that was a rather detailed map book, and it was too detailed for what they wanted to use it for, so they couldn't simply make copies of it. So they wanted an outline of each of the 92 community areas. So I spent my summer stenciling the borders of the streets that are for the 92 community areas to create something that they could then easily photocopy and use to put data in or something like that, versus an actual map that had too much on it. So inadvertently, I learned like where every community area is in the city of Chicago. And that's the random fact that I retain in my head these days.
Interesting.
Well, let me tell you about the trumpet family. The trumpet, B flat trumpet proper, is about 17 to 19 inches long. It has the smallest bell, ergo the kind of sharper, highest pitch sound. The cornet is 15 to 17 inches long. It has a much broader bell and a warmer sound, which is why we use it in schools to, teach kids the basic instrument. And then, of course, the flugelhorn, temporarily popularized by Chuck Mangione. I think it was the 70s. But it's about 15 to 17 inches. And then you've got your C trumpet, you've got your piccolo trumpet, which is about an octave higher. And then you have some specialty trumpets like the Firefly, which had a raised bell and a little trombone slide under it. I saw Maynard Ferguson play one once. I'm not even sure how that got in there, but when the question came up, it was like, oh, tell them about the trumpets.
I love that.
My random fact is very very simple. Most of us learn about liberation psychology from a guy from Central America, but in reality, liberation psychology was born in South Africa and the Philippines at the same time. And Milcar Cabral, who was killed at 37 years old, who actually talked about liberation psychology in a different context, and the Filipino Virgilio Enriquez from the Philippines, who actually was looking at as the first person who actually started to use liberation psychology in a clinical setting. So, so that's what stick in my head every time people talk about liberation psychology, and then they'll mention those two names. My first thing that comes to my head is you don't know what you're talking about. So,
Yeah, so I wish more random. I wish more facts just like stuck in my head in general. Random facts, a little tough for me. Something that came to mind was right, like I pay some amount of attention to media and how much there's a shift in entertainment, sort of digestion, and one of the things that has not really been surprising to me since COVID, but it's the idea that video games make more money than music, television, and movies combined now. And that number's only going to continue to grow. It's only continued growing after after the after COVID, right? Because there was a huge boom in video game revenue at that time. And I don't play video games too much anymore, but I do like to still follow the industry a bit. And it's very interesting to me that I think this number is just going to continue to climb higher and higher and higher as people are more interested in the interactive entertainment and more interested in the mobile entertainment. Now, I suppose the way that it maybe does not climb higher is if we get back to the more analog solutions that we were talking about earlier in the pod, as opposed to, right, like the more digital type stuff that's going on. And I imagine like more clients too are going to be coming in. I don't ever want to call like, something like video game addiction, but the idea of like a more like dependent type of behavior, that can be, for instance, very regulating for maybe like middle schoolers, high schoolers who are experiencing a lot of, potential, adverse experiences, whether it be at home or at school, that those things can be sort of like regulating in a way, not in the necessarily, in my opinion, like the most like therapeutic growth seeking way, but it's become such an enormous industry that it just seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger over time. And I'm wondering, like, what does it look like even 25 years from now if we don't have that solar flare thing happen, where this industry is maybe, 5, 10, 15, 20 times its size than it already is, because this is something that, a lot of people are really still interested in.
Right. And for me, my little random piece I discovered started with my interest when I lived in the mid 80s. I lived in Anchorage, Alaska, and I would love to go hiking and climbing all this stuff. And then I found out there's no snakes, and I didn't know that, so I got interested about snakes. And an interesting piece is that there are certain countries and locations that snakes do not exist, such as New Zealand, Iceland, Alaska, Hawaii, and a few other locations. And actually, in places like Hawaii, if a snake is introduced, it could threaten the ecosystem. So in places like New Zealand, they have laws that you could be arrested for bringing in snakes and so on. So actually, that I always thought that was an interesting fact that always stayed in my head of places I might visit because there's no snakes. I'm just curious how they're doing over there.
Did you say Ireland? I mean, didn't St. Patrick?
New Zealand, Iceland.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, wasn't it St. Patrick who got all the snakes out of Ireland?
That's the hype.
That's the hype.
That's the
Okay.
story.
But
That's the story.
apparently he left it.
PR.
Yeah, he left a few behind. I've got the last question. And this comes from this weekend's experience for me. How do you handle homecoming at the institution you work at or the one that you attend, in Mitch's case?
Boy, was I glad to see this question. Let me tell you, we have a phantom homecoming. We don't have a football team. I have always been very proud to work at a university that does not have a football team. And somewhere along, and we don't have people coming home either. I mean, if you think of homecoming, it was a traditional people come back to an alma mater or something, I guess. But we don't have that. But we decided one year we were going to have a parade anyway. And I'm telling the truth. I swear to God, this is a true story. The administration, who has since left and shall remain nameless, but yeah, they had a parade and everybody was in competition making floats. And then on the day of the parade, it rained and they canceled it. So I thought that was perfect. I said, man, if that ain't the America I live in, I don't know what is, but it was, it's a delight. I think they still do things. And I'm like, what sort of spell do you think people are under when they come here? Please tell me.
I can go. We don't have home. I mean, I never been any home parade or homecoming since I've been in academia as a student. I never done any of that. I avoid that like the plague. And I try not to go to graduation either unless I got a doctorate student graduating. So I'm trying to be very antisocial, stereotypical counselor ed.
Yeah, so I'm surprised to learn that CSU has homecoming. I don't know if we're still doing it. I literally like have no idea if CSU does homecoming or not. Um, he, that's probably where I should end it. So we, I do also work at now. I do work at a different institution, Bowdoin Wallace, and I actually organized, was part of the organization team rather, to organize homecoming my sophomore year, and that was actually like a really fun experience. It got me into, right, like sort of the event running kind of process, right, and like what that looks like, and that's like I think every year that I've been at a university, I've run at least one large campus-wide university event, or smaller event, right? Like the Teen Mental Health Summit, where we bring high school students from local Cleveland schools to campus. And so like that was actually like, the homecoming at Baldwin Wallace was actually like really fun. I remember we did have a parade. I got to like ride in the parade. I've never rode in a parade before, so that was exciting. And also, I'm not sure if I'm like going to go and like ride in a parade again. It's not on like my bucket list. It's nice to have it like not checked off of it, I guess. Not that it was ever on it, but yeah, I guess like homecoming for me, because like BW is having homecoming this weekend, and I was invited. I've got a lot of schoolwork that I've been catching up on all weekend, but they do like a really nice job, a really nice like family type atmosphere at BW. Each time that I've been to homecoming, I've really appreciated it. They do, of course, have a football team, and it's good vibes. I imagine that I'll attend a homecoming somewhere someday. Maybe another one at BW here sometime in the future. Who knows? But yeah.
I feel like I'm glad Mitch had a good answer, because I have not had a homecoming in a very long time. We don't do homecomings either. So I don't have much to contribute to that, Marty. I will say that years ago, I went to a homecoming with somebody to University of Missouri, and they have a huge football team, and we had pizza, and they have a whole thing. They went all out, and I was actually like, oh, they really go all out for homecoming. This is kind of fun. I actually like college football. I know that's not always popular in spaces. They're counselor educators, but I like college football. I enjoy football. So it was nice going to a homecoming that had the football game and the band and the music and the energy, and I thought that was fun. So
Well, all of your stories have brought back, or lack of stories, have brought back more stories in my mind about homecoming, and that first one being the first one being in high school. I was on the tennis team, and we didn't get to be part of homecoming because it was all around the football team. So the tennis team decided we were going to pick a date that was going to be our homecoming. And it involved picking the team that we knew we would beat because they probably wouldn't show up. And we weren't very good, but we were going to pick somebody who was actually worse than us. So we would at least win our homecoming game. It involved ditching classes, cutting classes early in the afternoon, getting high, and driving around the school in a station wagon with our tennis rackets out the window, honking the horn, um, and causing general mayhem, having our own homecoming parade. This weekend was Kent State's homecoming, and I have a bunch of international teachers in on this grant, and they live right down the street in our hotel from the path of the homecoming. So the last couple of years we've done this, we've had them walk over to the Kent State or Kent City Historical Society, because we have a person who works on our group with that area. And so we sit on their lawn across the street from the fraternities and the sororities. Uh, and it is a big thing. Nobody told me that the dress code was bare midriff, because that's all that was going on, and a lot of Taylor Swift music going on across the street. It would have been nice if they turned the music down when the bands came by, so the bands didn't have to compete with the Swifties. Um, so yeah, and we sat there. It was quite a spectacle for these international teachers who hadn't seen anything like it. Of course, then they went to the ball game. They went to the football game, and we lost miserably. As we our football team is not very good. Our GPA of the football team is pretty good, which I think is inversely proportional to how good your football team is. Um, so I am reluctantly involved in homecoming every year because it just happens we have this grant where the group's in during homecoming and we build it in to their cultural activity.
I'm
For good people
I'm
want
glad
it.
you described that, Marty. I am a citizen of Kent, Ohio. I'm an alumnus of course, Kent State. I've been here over 30 years. You would think I would get used to this. Every year, I'm on the couch and I hear pop, 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 and I'm like, all right, that's it. We're under attack. Everybody get to the basement. We're going to start this thing, and it's, oh no, it's fireworks. I'm like, why are we doing fireworks? It's fall. I mean, I like fall, but and then they're like, no, it's homecoming. It's Kent State homecoming. And then the next morning we hear a parade going up the road, and it's quite surreal. And I like that aspect of it.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I've got the final shot question. The food you crave outside of its season.
My Uncle Jack's Irish stew, which I would eat any season of the year.
But it's out of when is it? Why is it out of season?
Oh, it's a winter meal. I mean, you cook the whole thing in bacon fat, for heaven's sake. So let's just start there. It's about a 12-hour process.
Okay, all right. Adele?
Pasteles.
Oh, okay.
It's usually typical food for Christmas.
Yeah.
But I can eat it all year long, and my wife knows. So every time I go home, she found something. So
Yeah.
so, but pasteles is good. Pasteles with pigeon peas, rice, potato salad, and pork. Ah.
Hungry. That sounds so
Sounds really good.
It's delicious. It's not good for you, but it's delicious.
I think, yeah, delicious and not good for you go together in my culture. So that makes total sense.
For me, this is something that I eat year round. And even though the taste definitely changes, is strawberries. I'm just a strawberry kind of I'm a strawberry kind of dude. My mom's nickname growing up was actually Strawberry, so maybe that's where I got it from. Uh, and I just besides the seeds that get in my teeth, although maybe that is part of the enjoyment of it, but I just love strawberries.
I think of two that come up for me. Pumpkin bread. I could eat that all year round. Love it. Right now it's in season, so I'm on cloud nine. The other one is tembleque, which I think a lot of people eat all year round, but I think it's mostly a holiday season dessert. What do you think, Adele? Tembleque, is that mostly like a holiday season? It's a Puerto Rican thing, so he'll.
I think it's all year round, but some people like to have it more at Christmas.
Yeah, and so it's this delicious dessert custard with we put cinnamon on top, and I could eat it all year round. So those are the two.
Mine has to be sweet corn, particularly if it's corn on the cob, and I'll survive with frozen corn during the winter. But sweet corn, there's nothing like sweet corn for me. I crave it outside of the season. So maybe there's something our listeners have that they crave outside of the season. Hope you do find that, or even if it's outside of the season. I want to thank the firing squad Maria, Edil, Elliot, and Mitch for joining us tonight. Look for some of these characters on their podcasts on the podtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. Make sure and check out the Tech Savvy Professor podcast hosted by myself and Eric Perry, and also Vision Profiles, a podcast about Apple Vision Pro that I'm doing. Our theme music is from Menage a Quad, Real Swing Shet. That's it for this episode of Circular Firing Squad. Ready, fire, aim.